Hey YouTube. So, let me just start by kind of putting out there that I know the last video was pretty goofy. I didn't realize, one, that I was live at the time. I think I said I was not live, and then I also said that it was supposed to be scheduled at 3:30. I swear, I did hit all those buttons, but for some reason it just did not actually register with YouTube. But nevertheless, the point I made was important. It's an important question to ask. But I wanted to talk in this video about something that I alluded to in that last video, actually, towards the end of it. So the discussion for today would kind of be veganism in the context of it being a real macro level solution for replacing the kind of systems that have been established through animal agriculture as a practice. So just to kind of be clear, it's more than just like the factory farms, it is about the grain and the soy farms too. Most of the grain and soy that is produced ends up feeding the animals that we end up eating, which is a kind of like a foolish hypocrisy that Evan actually pointed out in a post of his a little while back. It's a really interesting read, but so in addition to that, it is, the distribution, the way that is distributed, the way that there's a international trade system that centrally focuses on animal agriculture. So what do we do as vegans to replace those systems? Because it's one thing to say veganism is good for me as an individual, and for you as an individual, and maybe for groups of individuals, maybe even a society. But it's entirely different to try to make the case that it's something that is sufficient to maintain society, which is, and this is where it gets maybe a little bit abstract, but think about it like this. When we start to implement vegan policies, when we get to that point in society, what are we replacing the current systems with? What do we tell to the farmers who, regardless of the ugliness of animal farming and animal slaughter, these farmers whose lives and whose traditions and history is based on farming, that's a tough sell, and they matter too, especially in a democratic society, the one that we live in. And so there's that, but there's also the humanity of it. I don't want to put people out of work. I don't think it's appropriate or ethical for us to be okay with the economic and social and psychological and interpersonal harms that might come from overhauling an economic system that maybe doesn't work for some people. I mean, farming for decades has kind of been very poor in its conditions in America, but it's so bad now, it's so untenable now that nobody even wants to consider an alternative, because how much, different just means a little bit worse, according to a lot of farmers, and they're not entirely wrong about that, or are they? I think that one of the things that we're going to start to be doing here in The Reason Vegan, you'll see, definitely follow us on YouTube, all that stuff, so Facebook, Instagram, especially on our website. We're really going to start moving this organization forward, and trying to actually answer those questions. How do we replace those systems? It's a question that matters a lot, and it matters deeply. So, when we talk about advancing veganism, kind of bringing it up from a level of being an individual choice to the level of public policy and influencing society, how do we do that? How do we go about that? How do we phase out animal exploitation? Something that's actually really intriguing to me that presently I do not have a statement on, but it's very interesting, is this isn't something that NPR pointed out years ago, before I even went vegan, but that for vegans, it's very difficult to find medicine, and prescriptions that have not been tested on animals, or that are not derived from animal proteins or any type of compound. And it's hard because on the supply side, in terms of how it's manufactured, maybe that's challenging. But also, there are certain limitations that the government places. For example, when it comes to like FDA I forget the exact phrase, but the phases of research that companies have to go through before they can put medicine onto market. Those phases require that animal models be used before the chemical or prospective, medicine is used on humans. So in order to bring anything to market that kind of has that purpose, it has to be tested on animals. That's like one particular challenge. But even, in terms of what do you do for the farmers? I wrote about just a few months ago, I think, how, the trade war that it was not even as bad as it is currently with China, but how the worsening situation really does harm the markets of soy, for example, and pork. But is that necessarily a good thing? And not in terms of veganism or the cause, but really in terms of what it does politically, socially, and economically for the lives of those individuals who are impacted, the farmers, the people who distribute those goods. We don't want to be cavalier and say those losses, those pains, those harms are worth, adapting to a vegan life for society. Or at least our position at The Reason Vegan is that we shouldn't do that. I'm certainly open to comments down below if you want to put your perspective. I mean, if you believe that it is worth those losses, I'm certainly interested in hearing why. I believe we shouldn't, and because, really just because I don't want to harm anything, anyone, any being, and I wouldn't want to harm a human being either. I don't think that in that regard, that two wrongs make a right. I think that it's wrong to exploit animals, and maybe it's wrong to make it difficult for individuals to have jobs where they can exploit animals. But I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing if they don't have a job that they can go to that would provide them a sufficient income to what they were making. How do you do those things? It's very challenging. So I'm sure I've said this before, but I like public policy. That's my thing. Sorry, there's like a spider here. Public policy is my thing, and I've been following the course of action on the Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill that's supposed to be an extension of the 2014 law, and it did not pass the joint conference. So a few programs are no longer being funded, and they're trying to work on a new plan for this current fiscal year. The Reason Vegan is not, well, we're going to incorporate as a nonprofit, but we are not going to do lobbying. But it is an interesting lens to look through when thinking about how to replace animal agriculture with a vegan manufacturing system, and how to expand that to a societal and an international level. Because the other thing, especially when you talk international, is what do you do for the individuals whose economies really aren't even developed to try to answer these questions at all? To countries there are many states, for example, in Africa that are resource dependent, wherein they have one or a few resources that they primarily trade in. And that is good for them. They are able to trade, but when it comes to things like, I was speaking with a woman from Uganda last week. She was doing a lecture, and she had mentioned she's the daughter of a fisherman. And in Uganda, it's difficult to come across good jobs, but those are semi-good jobs that are easy to get because, they're on the coast. And when you have no choice, those choices about whether to exploit animals or not, it almost becomes inconceivable because you have to live. I think that anyone, even reasonable vegans, would be hard-pressed to make the case that those people ought to suffer or stress more about how they'll make money. It's a tough choice, but we have to positively say, if it means a society is going to be brought to its knees, what do you do? how do you say no? How do you find a vegan alternative for those things? I mean, these are all important questions to ask, and I actually really don't think that there are a lot of answers. I think that there are a lot of organizations and individuals who focus their energy on the principles and the theories behind animal liberation and veganism and like environmental and ecological sustainability. But I think that there are not many models and approaches to how to actually bring those systems out from just being individual choices and making them societally accessible and implementable alternatives, which will eventually hopefully replace the current system. You know, it's all about phasing these things in. And I think what makes this especially challenging, this question, is when you think about public policy, it's more than just literal public policies. It's about implementation and how you coordinate between systems and gather information, and of course how you impose punishments or some type of measured response that is punitive, at least, for companies and entities that don't follow government regulation and stuff like that. Those questions are very difficult to answer. I mean, the government sucks at answering them right now. You know, as much as I'm a progressive and I love what the government is there for, it doesn't do a great job a lot of the times. You know, the reason Vegan really wants to help in answering those questions, and we're curious to know how you feel too. You know, what systems, what models can you all think of? Do you know of any ideas? Are there any that you've got in your head that might be good at maybe making it easier for farmers to phase out animals? You know, making it easier. You know, one foolhardy thing I thought was like maybe dairy farmers can get subsidized or pay heavy, so they can either pay a heavier tax for producing dairy milk, or they can get subsidies for trying to transition into like dairy-free milks. So whether that's almond milk, oat milk, whatever is most suitable for the environment that they work in, how do we make it more affordable for them to make that transition? Because a lot of this stuff is about, frankly, it's about subsidies. You know, we're making people to make economic choices about their livelihood, and we should be making sure that they're supported. And not only should we, but when they're not supported, the economy more generally becomes destabilized. You know, there have been times throughout history where the government has had to buy goods just to keep the prices artificially high so that the markets don't crash. In fact, they even did it with dairy. And there's a really interesting episode of Planet Money I want you all to listen to, a little bit of homework, where they talk about government cheese and about how the government bought a bunch of, I think it was milk solids, and they basically turned it into cheese. It was cheese. They were buying cheese because the cheese industry was having difficulty. They were not making money, and the government bought all this cheese just to keep the price high. And they literally put it in a cage, and then they eventually sold it. And just an interesting example of how the government really should be doing things when times get tough, I believe. But the types of things that they do or have done, you know, need to be different for the future. Maybe instead of saying, hey, we'll make it easier to get rid of that cheese and have you reproduce more cheese, maybe we buy the cheese once, get rid of it, and then just start paying you to do non-dairy milks or something, you know? I don't know. Maybe you guys know. Let me know in the comments. Sorry if this is a little shaky. I'm like standing right now and I'm at work. I have to like go back in for my break soon. But I just wanted to do this video. This is something that, you know, it's a little less formal right now. I want to do more of a lecturely kind of thing. I got to start getting my hands in there. A more of a lecturely style video eventually, because, you know, the reason vegan really does have intentions to move forward, advance itself and the movement of animal liberation and veganism. And we really plan to have cogent and informed and efficacious solutions and prescriptions for how to solve problems on a public policy and societal level. So I really do want to commit energy and time to making sure that I can make those views public and those ideas. Not quite there yet. I got a lot of learning to do. I'm doing some other things anyway. You know, but I am always trying to structure this organization. You know, Mike and Evan are super great too. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but definitely check out the website. I used to write, I don't write anymore. But Mike and Evan is very prolific. And what they do, what Mike and Evan do especially well, that I'm not able to do as well, is just to frame the technical parts about veganism in that reasoned way. You know, I think that maybe my specialty is how to frame the argument and how to organize things in general. But they're very good at making the case more substantively than I am. So definitely check out their pieces, their work. But, you know, again, just check out everything we do. We've got a Patreon page, and I'm not trying to be too assertive right now, but I'm going to start asking people for money because, you know, it's important. It's a symbol of your faith in us as an organization. It's only $1 per month, but we also want to have an idea of a possible funding base, maybe. You know, I mean, we really do have intentions on moving forward and incorporating. You know, we're really tight-lipped about it right now. But that's just because we are trying to get a strong posture so we can start making the case very loudly and publicly for funds and for support publicly. But again, check us out. Check out my other videos. I'm going to be doing videos a little more frequently anyway, so you guys will see me soon enough. All right? Thanks. Have a good day.